Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, episode 50. I can't believe we're here already, just after 7 months since the release. We're already through 50 episodes of the podcast. So as always, thanks to everyone for supporting me and the kind of vision that I have here with East Meets West. And I promise to keep trying to put out the best information and content possible from the adventure hunting aspect from any place from east to west. So anyways, just some quick news here. This upcoming weekend, February 16th, I'll be out in Manchester, Michigan for the Wilderness Connection Wild Game Dinner. I'm doing a speaking presentation there actually on planning a Western hunt, and I'll be selling some apparel, doing some giveaways, a whole bunch of fun stuff there. And wanted to announce the winners, the two winners of the Onyx Elite memberships that I gave away through Instagram and Facebook, as well as if you purchased any of the East Meets West apparel off of the website in January, you were entered to win. So thank you to Vinny Esposito and Patrick Reynolds, as they are the winners for this giveaway here from Onyx. So $99 value, 1 year Elite membership, all 50 states are covered, and I'll be sending those out here this week. So be looking for some more giveaways to be coming up here soon. So we're going to jump into the sponsors of the podcast. So as I announced last week, the University of Elk Hunting by Elk 101 is now a sponsor of the podcast. If you're looking for a resource as far as everything encapsulating elk hunting, from the planning phases through the scouting, fitness, gear, elk behavior, elk knowledge, elk calling, packing out meat, field care meat, everything from that aspect, the University of Elk Hunting is your complete comprehensive resource for that. I've been using the University of Elk Hunting now for 3 years myself. I've purchased the program, and Corey and I have partnered up here for 2019, and he decided to offer all the listeners of the podcast $20 off of the program. So normally $99, you can pick it up for $79 with code EastMeetsWest at checkout. In addition, Heather's Choice is also a sponsor of the podcast, as they have the meals for adventuring that are healthy and provide you with the nutrients that are needed to push through long 7, 12, 14 day hunts, as well as snacking on their packarons in a tree stand. Awesome products from Heather's Choice. If you use the code EastMeetsWest, it'll get you free shipping on any orders over $99. All right, with that being said, let's jump right into this here. Damon Bungard from Orion Coolers will be the guest on this podcast. Damon's a very interesting guy, and he was one of the first people I reached out to when I had the idea of the podcast. Last January, I actually sent him a message on Instagram and kind of introduced myself there to get him on the podcast. Finally, we're able to link up, get this going. He's coming from the mountains of Tennessee, doing some unique whitetail hunting experiences there, but he also travels the world doing some pretty cool hunts throughout from that standpoint. If you would, go on to iTunes or wherever you're listening to the podcast at, give us a rating and review, and subscribe to the podcast. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. Today I have on the line a special guest from down south in Tennessee. I have Damon Bungard on the line. Damon, how are things going today?
Good, Bo. How are you doing?
I can't complain. It's a nice cold day here in Pennsylvania.
So you sucked into the polar vortex?
Oh yeah, we're sucked into it here. Some negative temperatures and everything else. So it's a good day to be inside right now.
Yeah, I've had a fire going in the fireplace most of the day, so I can't complain.
Yeah. How's the weather down there?
I think it was in the mid-20s today, which is pretty. It's cold. Sometimes there'll be periods here every winter where it's, in the teens, highs in the teens or 20s, but it's not normal. Usually we're in the 30s, 40s.
I gotcha. Yeah, we had some pretty cold weather today. I was working outside a little bit, and that wasn't ideal. Let's put it that way.
I bet.
Yeah. So, anyways, Damon, do you want to start off here with introducing yourself and giving the listeners a background on you and who you are?
Sure. So, I launched and am brand manager of Orion Coolers. I'm product manager at Jackson Kayak, and I just launched and am brand manager of Orion Kennels. So that's kind of what I do professionally. So I'm involved a lot in product development, but also a lot in sales and marketing and different things in the outdoor industry. And so my background is I grew up as an Army brat, military dependent, however we want to call ourselves. So my father was a colonel in the Army, and I grew up like all military dependents, getting new orders to move every few years and kind of traveling the world. And I was fortunate enough that no matter where we lived in the world, starting in second grade, I think my parents would put me on a plane and send me to my grandparents' property in South Carolina for the summer. So school would end and, lived in Germany, get on the plane. My mom and dad would stay in Germany, and my brother and I would fly back and spend our summers outside doing, whatever we wanted, riding four-wheelers and fishing and shooting and, all the stuff now that would probably send somebody to, like, parents to child services for. So that was good. And traveling, my family's history is from Europe, and hunting goes way back in my family. My great-grandfather was a game warden in Austria. We have a lot of, deer roebuck mounts going back to the 1800s. And so both my grandfathers, they were in the war, or they were Army and Marines, and they hunted. So they started taking me hunting at a young age and shooting at a young age and bows and guns and all of it. And so, and no matter where we lived, my father went out of his way to, he's very busy, obviously, but still try to make time to take me hunting. Whether it was Fort Stewart, Georgia, or Fort Hood, Texas, or going hiking in the Alps and in Europe. I was too young to hunt there, but we'd go hunt crystals, and we'd go hunt just stuff to look at, stuff to glass. And so, through school, I graduated high school in Texas. I had a scholarship to Clemson University in South Carolina. Went to school at Clemson, go Tigers. And that's kind of where my kind of outdoor professional career, I could say, began. I started guiding there, backpacking and rock climbing in the Southern Appalachians around North Carolina, Brevard, North Carolina. And I worked at the local outdoor shop. It was called Outdoor Adventures at the time. Now it's Elk Trading Company. And I also got professionally sponsored as a whitewater kayaker back then. And whitewater kayaking, while I was in college, kind of, dominated my lifestyle. And I paddled as much as I possibly could wherever I could. And then when I graduated, I moved to Vermont and took a job in the aerospace and defense industry. And I worked in the defense industry for about a decade, working on various missile programs and counter IED programs and different things. But also while still being a professional and sponsored athlete for kayaking. And I traveled the world from Chile to France to Canada, all over paddling whitewater. And and then eventually transitioned full time out of product development in the defense world into product development in the outdoor world. That happened in 2011, and I worked from Vermont for a few years, and then finally we moved to Tennessee about 2014. So that's the history there. And hunting's kind of always been in my life. I've had a lot of passions. Backpacking led to rock climbing. Whitewater. The backpacking led to rock climbing, and I pursued those very heavily. And then I was literally rock climbing in the New River Gorge one day and saw it was super hot, and I was just getting baked on the rock. And I saw kayakers having fun down on the river, and I was like, man, I should go do that. That seems like a lot better way to spend a hot day. And literally, I went to like the outdoor store, backcountry in Blacksburg, Virginia, bought a kayak, all the gear, learned to roll in about 15 minutes. And within 6 months, I was, professionally involved in whitewater kayaking. And I just took to it. I was, call it a natural, whatever. And then whitewater, took me all over the world as my next passion. And then I moved to Vermont. I can't paddle in the winter. Everything freezes. So then ice climbing, occupied my life, and mountaineering for quite a while. But hunting was always along the way. I eat game. And then as I've gotten older, a lot of backcountry hunting to me has combined a lot of the different aspects of rock climbing and just exploring and travel, and being self-sufficient. A backcountry hunt's just backpacking with a gun, really. So,
yeah.
So, it's kind of all come full circle. And I still paddle whitewater every now and again. Not nearly as much as I used to. I spend way more time in fishing kayaks. And fly fishing is a huge part of my life. But this year I'm going to do a 10-day whitewater kayak self-support of the Grand Canyon. So that should be fun.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty interesting trip. How long will that take?
It'll take about 10 days on the water. We can do it in less than that. But that's what our permit is for 10 days. So not counting travel time to and from the canyon. But
I gotcha. So yeah, you've had a pretty interesting background in just about every outdoor space, from the hunting community into the outdoor sports side of things. So that's a really interesting aspect. And you'd said from the beginning, from when you were a kid, you were traveling and everything, just as a part of the lifestyle of growing up in, that environment in the military family and everything along those lines. Did that kind of translate into your love for, traveling to hunt and backcountry hunting and everything else?
I think it definitely did. It teaches you independence at a very young age, and self-sufficiency and all those, in decision making and all those things that I think ultimately are what, hunting, I gravitate to in hunting. And I'm a problem solver. So whether it's looking at a rapid and figuring out how to run it, or looking at rock or ice and figuring out how to climb it, or looking at a species and figuring out how to hunt it, it's all really just problem solving, right? And there's different physical aspects of each of them that are all come into play in solving that problem. But that's kind of a very, I'm an engineering by degree. That's a very engineering way of looking at things, but without a lot, distilling it down. But that is kind of, I think, when I fundamentally look at it, fly fishing is the same way, figuring out how to find the fish, then how to catch the fish. It's all part of the process, right? It's all what makes it fun. So
yeah, no, that's super interesting. And like you said, it's funny seeing how, a lot of people get into it and their reasons behind it. And it's pretty easy to see, like you said, you like that challenge of it and the problem solving aspect. And you said it while I was thinking it, the engineering mind that comes out of there. It's very similar to my brother's the same way. He's got that same engineering mindset, loves figuring things out and just diving into it full force. Sounds like a little bit you have a little bit of addictive personality when it comes to getting, I guess, for lack of better terms, obsessed with certain aspects.
No doubt about it. That when I strike something that I like, it tends to be a cannonball, not waiting in. So
yeah.
And that's good and bad. But, I think a lot of things you learn. I think if you want to get good at something quick, you surround yourself with people that know what they're doing, and that you can emulate and learn from. And I think that's true for a lot of aspects in life. If you surround yourself with good people, you tend to be a good person. And I think that's true whether, growing up, I played a lot of tennis, and whether it was, learning to play competitive high level tennis or fly fishing or whitewater kayaking, all of it, there's just it's never ending learning. And I love that hunting and fishing constantly reminds me that I'm dumber than fish and deer.
Yeah.
Because they tend to win. So that's a good humbling thing to have keep reminding yourself of, is that yes, that fish is smarter than I am.
Yeah, they knock me off my pedestal just about every single year, every single hunt. It seems like just when I think I got things figured out and I'm on my high horse, they throw me right down.
Yeah,
but no, it's funny that you say that, because I haven't gotten into fly fishing at all yet because I'm afraid of it. That I think I'm going to get super addicted to it, and I just feel like my time is so limited, as all of ours is. But it's one of those things that I know with my addictive personality with it that I'm going to go full force. And my brother's experiencing that right now as he's diving into the fly fishing world, and he's completely obsessed with it, and keeps getting me like looking at it, but I'm afraid to go full force.
It was interesting for me because it was whitewater that really led me to whitewater kayaking, led me to fly fishing, because I kept finding myself in places that I know nobody ever fished, and I was seeing trout and these beautiful wild places. And I actually started fly fishing at a whitewater demo event. There were fish rising, and I was like, I need something to occupy the evenings by my campsite. I could go fish. So I took a class at like LL Bean on how to cast at a demo I was doing over there at LL Bean's main headquarters there in Freeport, Maine. And then kind of boom, just like you're saying, it was like, all right, now I got to do this all the time, everywhere. Where can I go? And then, in whitewater, to me, ultimately was about interacting with rivers. And I find a lot of the same pleasure that came from running hard whitewater. I still get wading in a river and just spending time being part of that ecosystem, and really in the ecosystem, and reading all the signs that it's giving you, and being part of it. So, now kayak fly fishing is, I've been fortunate that that's part of my job. So whether it's filming kayaks in Belize that we've made for fly fishing, or, taking my dad to Alaska and taking him fly fishing, or other friends, I get to experience all that.
Yeah, that's not too bad of a job, I'd say, to get to test all those aspects. You kind of have it all covered from the side with Orion, with you were saying having the Jackson kayak side of things, and then the Orion Coolers, and then now Orion Kennels. You kind of have a lot of things covered there that you get to, I guess, from the field test and product testing side of things, get to do some fun stuff.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to make products that are meant to do a job and do specific things and work well at what they do. And, obviously I have a level of insight into these activities that makes developing products to do them more fun and better. I don't want to say easy, but you kind of get the point. It's like we live it. We have and I'm not the only one in the company. We have a passionate group of the Jackson family. I call them the Kennedys of whitewater, the first family of whitewater. So they've won more whitewater championships and races than anybody else. So, we know what we're doing when it comes to whitewater kayaks. We have a great kayak fishing crew. And with Coolers, it was, when I decided to launch Orion Coolers, it was, there was a lot of, just call them, I don't want to say plastic boxes out there, but ultimately there were a lot of coolers that all they did was keep things cold. And we thought, they can do a lot more and be part of your life. They can be part of your camping setup. They can be your kitchen setup. They can be mounted on a kayak. They can, there's a lot of different things a cooler can enhance in your life other than keeping things cold. So we tried to design a modular cooler system that you could tailor to whatever your passion was day to day. And then now same with the kennels, try to figure out ways to really integrate a kennel into outdoor enthusiast lives with their dogs and make all that better. So it's fun seeing how these things come to life and how they can help you do more and have more fun.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds like you're kind of living what you preach there as far as surrounding yourself with, very talented people in each aspect, and then you become, a part of it, learn what you're talking about, the Jackson family there, as far as, how they were, won more championships, or however you worded that there. That's definitely an important aspect as far as succeeding in anything really in life, but as far as the route that you've taken, that's extremely important, I think.
Yeah, we want to walk the walk. We don't want to just talk the talk. So
yeah, and I was actually going to wait till later in the podcast to discuss this, but while we're kind of on the topic, do you want to dive into, since with a lot of my listeners, I guess here, specifically with the hunting community and everything, can you kind of discuss how Orion Coolers are designed for a hunt from the hunting side of things, how you can use that?
Sure. So, I've traveled a lot to hunt. Obviously, people that do, whether you're driving big cross country trips, from East Coast to out West going to elk hunt, or flying. When I lived in Vermont, I'd fly down to my parents. My dad retired outside of Fort Stewart. He retired as the county engineer for Chatham County, Georgia, which is the Savannah area. And I'd go down multiple times a year to hunt hogs and deer with him. And then I'd fly him home, and I had a nice cooler to, check it on the airplane, fly it home. So ultimately, a good cooler, and there's a lot of great premium cooler brands out there. We all know what they are. They do a good job and they all work. But as I'm into overlanding, camping out of my vehicle, out of my Jeep, and I had friends in an overland club, and it's always about having to carry less. So when it came to our coolers, it was, why can't we mount a seat back system on the kennel, just like our kayak seat backs, so that once you're at your campsite, whether it's a backcountry hunting campsite or a music festival, it doesn't matter. The cooler comes out, you set it by your fire, and you have a comfortable backrest. Now it's also a chair. I don't have to bring an extra chair. When it's little things like bottle openers, I think we've all been at a party or been in the dark in the woods, and you go in the cooler and you get your beer out, and then you ask, who's got the opener? Well, we integrated more tie-down points to give you a lot of flexibility mounting in ATVs or backs of trucks. But those tie-down points in the corners are also bottle openers. And that was one of the patented aspects of the design. We tucked in the latches so that, like a lot of us, if I'm sliding my SKB bow case and my, my Sitka wheel duffel and my cooler all in the back of the Jeep, a lot of latches would snag. It's very tight space. I got it figured out like a Tetris game, right? I know what goes where. And if you're sliding it in and that your latch snags and you lose your seal, you either you bust your knuckles up trying to slide your hand in there to reclose that latch, or you don't know it's knocked off and you lose your seal during a long drive. So all those things kind of, came in to play. And people try to justify value of expensive coolers, and it depends on how you live and how often you use it. But this is a great example, real world story. So for any of the East Coast listeners here, whoever are interested in doing a moose hunt, without that you can drive to. So I took Dad and we did a moose hunt in Newfoundland a couple seasons ago. So I drove from Tennessee we had 8 Orions for this trip. I drove from Tennessee to Vermont and left my wife there. She's from Vermont, left her with her mother in Virginia. My father flew into Burlington. Then we drove from Burlington to Nova Scotia. Got on the ferry, overnight ferry to Newfoundland. Got on float planes. Got flown in, got dropped, did our hunt, got 2 bulls, And then midweek, they were able to run our meat out on an Argo and get picked up, and then got it to a processor. So then we got to that processor at like noon on a Saturday at the end of our hunt. And they had it mostly, it had been in the freezer for a little bit, but it was kind of that state of meat that's, you squeeze it and it's kind of crunchy. It's still a little soft, kind of crunches a little bit. And that's how we had roughly 500 pounds of meat. And it all went into the Orions. So, and then that left, just a few inches on top of dead airspace, which I then filled with ice. And you always want to make sure your dead airspace is one of your heat killers. So you want to make sure anytime you pack a premium cooler dense, you pack it for a long term. You want to pack it densely. And then that's noon on Saturday. Got back to the ferry, overnight ferry one day and a half back to Vermont. Bottom line is, it was a week before I got back to Charlotte, which was where my father had flown. I left his car, actually flown out of there, left his car. And I handed him off his 4 coolers, and I took mine, came back to Tennessee. So I got back to Tennessee. It was roughly, I think, 8 days after we left Newfoundland, and never had opened them up. And the meat and the ice layer on top was unchanged, and the meat was actually unchanged. Like, that semi-crunchy state of meat was still 100% there. So, no need to drive a generator and a fridge freezer. None of that stuff. You see all these contraptions and flatbeds going up there. All the meat was fine. Well, Dad he got home the day before Hurricane Matthew, if you recall it, coming up the East Coast, and all the evacuations and stuff. And he was in the evacuation zone in Savannah, and he called and said, son, I have 100 pounds of meat. I'm going to lose power tomorrow. What should I do? And I was like, put everything you have in your chest freezer. And as soon as you lose power, put them all right back in the Orions. And he was like, really? I was like, oh yeah. When you lose power tomorrow, when the storm hits, stick it back in. So sure enough, that's what he did. He got a chill on it overnight in the freezer, lost power next day, put them right back in the Orions, and they were out of power for 10 days. And he literally called me and he said, son, I am watching Martha, who was his neighbor across the street. I am watching Martha empty her freezer while I'm repacking my frozen moose into ours, like throwing her freezer away. So, that value right there, I don't know how much I put a lot of value on 300 pounds of moose meat that he would have lost.
Yeah, I'd say.
After all that effort that we had just gone through to get it all, I was going to be terrible if he lost all of it. So the fact is, there's a lot of, it's a long story to just say, if you live a certain lifestyle, it's worth making an investment in any premium cooler. Make your choice as you wish. But there's a lot of good ones out there, and they do a good job, and they can definitely, once you have one for a while, you'll realize, how did I ever not have one of these? So.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another thing I don't think that you had mentioned that I had seen in one of the Orion coolers. It was a cutting board. Is that something that's built in, or is that an added feature?
That's one of the accessories. It's called the Buckboard. We have a couple different ones. There's one that's a vertical divider. It's just a food grade cutting board. Then we have a cutting board that rests on top of the opening. There's a recess, the lip, and if you open when it's installed, when you open the cooler lid, all you're going to see is this cutting board. And on one side is the cutting board, and the other side has a couple different buck pack light tools recessed in on magnets. So they always have a place. You never lose them. If you've worked assembly lines and production, people often start a ship with tools coming from an open slot and then end it with all the tools going back into the same open slot. So, you haven't lost any tools in the course of the day. Same kind of concept. I don't like getting to my campsite in the dark and fumbling around trying to make dinner. Where's my knife? Where's this? They always have a place. They're always stored there. They're protected. So it's a pretty cool system called the Buckboard. We have it for different sizes. Or all the sizes of the coolers have their own custom one. But
awesome.
Comes in pretty handy.
Well, cool. That's kind of what I wanted to cover there from the Orion standpoint. So let's dive into some fun stuff here, Damon. Let's dive into this recent Coues Deer hunt that you were just telling me about that you went on, what was it, a few weeks ago?
Yeah, it was January, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, I think 12th to 20th, somewhere in there. Arizona, my first time on a Coues Deer hunt. I've been able to hunt a few different, localities of whitetail from Ontario, tracking them in the snow in Ontario to, southeastern, mid-Atlantic whitetail, Seminole whitetail, way south Georgia and Florida, and then mule deer out west, and blacktail. We did a blacktail hunt this last fall up in Alaska on Kodiak. But never hunted Coues. And for those who don't know, Coues deer or Coues deer, I've heard it pronounced both ways. I'm not really sure which the proper one is. They're basically a really small whitetail subspecies, about 100 pounds as adults. Live in the desert of the Southwest, states like Arizona, New Mexico. I don't know if they get into Texas or not. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some. And in Mexico itself. And so, I'd invite to go out and Jackson Kayaks, we're a private company, but one of our main investors has a ranch there that borders National Forest. So he'd offered to horse pack us in, and I was like, okay, sounds like a pretty cheap hunt. Tags are over the counter in January for archery, so anybody can go out and do it. And so me and a cameraman, flew out and got our tags, and we got Tony to thank you, Tony, got to pack us in with a horse and a mule, and it was nice. Backcountry hunts are great, but you usually got to skimp on what you bring. It's a luxury when you get to have a mule carry 100 pounds of water for you and frozen steaks for multiple nights.
Yeah.
To cook on the fire. So that was a real nice luxury to be able to hike in for miles with, decently light packs and having the mule do most of the work. But we had a great campsite, and first night we were able to glass a buck running a doe up over this ridge line. We were camped at around 6,000 feet. That was up around 7. And next day we headed up there and just got right into like Coues Deer rut mania. There was 6 or 8 does running all kind of directions, 3 or 4 different bucks chasing them all over. And we had them, at one point, this one doe, I thought she was going to bring a buck right to us, and she zigged instead of zagged, and the buck stayed at 80 yards out instead of coming to 30, 40. And we kept just sneaking in. We had this one beautiful buck at about 100 yards for 28, 30 minutes broadside. I mean, such an easy rifle shot, just a gimme rifle shot, and just couldn't get him. Like I couldn't get him to come to a grunt or a doe call or anything. And then finally he bedded down and was right on this knife edge ridge. And I was like, okay, now's my chance. I can fall off the back side of the ridge where he can't see me. And then when I can get closer and then pop out above him. And then when I pop out, he should stand up and be in bow range. And just as I'm about to make my move to close that last, 60 yards to get into bow range, this little kind of dumb forkhorn spike comes kind of just strolling in like, young bucks do, scent going all over the place. Clearly there's a hot doe there. And, he's kind of running around. He's in bow range. I let him pass. I'm like, get out of here. I want to, I'm trying to get the other one. And he decides to walk over near that big one, which then gets him to stand up and run him off. But then he decided to kind of start slowly walking out of view. So I tried to make my move quick and still pop up. And then he just was gone. And I saw that little spike again, let him walk again. I was looking for the big guy, and it was like a textbook first day. It was like, okay, first day we get to camp, we glass deer. Next day we find said deer, almost get bow shot. Like it's really only way it could have ended better was obviously getting a deer, but it was pretty epic. Like this is textbook. This is what you want to have happen out west. Get there, glass, find animals, get on animals. And then the course of the next week, we just never could get close again to really anything. We saw deer, a lone buck, wandering miles away across 2 canyons. And we watched a doe across this canyon. She was 100 yards, probably as a crow flies from us. Sorry, about 200 yards. But like she was feeding on this bush for 10 minutes and then stepped behind the bush and just disappeared. I mean, we literally watched that deer disappear. There was a little bit of stuff to her right, and a little bit under her, but we don't know where that deer went. both of us looked like that deer just disappeared, and she kept looking over her shoulder, like, "Oh, it's gotta be a buck with her. We'll see him. Maybe we'll see him in bed." She just poof, and that's kind of, they call them the desert ghosts, and I know exactly why. They blend right in, and they just literally disappear in that landscape. But ultimately it was not a hunt where I came home feeling like I had done something wrong or disappointed. It was a really good week in the Arizona mountains. We didn't see a person. Just a good time, but certainly hope to have another chance at it one day. But it's worth a shot if people have time in January. Over-the-counter archery tags, lots of public land. Have at it.
Yeah, so like you were saying that they're like a subspecies of a whitetail. And I know the landscape is completely different than where you're typically hunting whitetails, but do they act similarly to, or
they don't? They act well, yes and no. But they act a little more like a mule deer in some aspects. But one of the key differences during the rut is they act more like an elk in that the bucks tend to have a harem of does. So like a bull elk will have a herd of cows, and maybe some younger satellite bulls with them that he'll tolerate. Coues deer tend to do the same thing. So tend to be, you find a group of does and you look for the buck shadowing them. And I'm no Coues deer hunting expert. This is just what I put together from friends and other inputs. Randy Newberg goes every year, and a lot of other industry people go in between ATA and SHOT Show. Is a common time to go because you're going to be out anyway for SHOT Show in Vegas. And what I gathered was, spend your time glassing for does, and then find the buck because he's not going to be far off. And that was really our experience that first day. Was first hunting day was, there was a cluster of does. A couple of them were, they just looked exhausted seeing these bucks running them around. And they had drawn all the activity there. And I think it's kind of feast or famine if you're there peak rut like that. It's either going to be you're on a cluster of deer or you're on, nothing. You're on rock.
Yeah.
So, I'm really curious what it's like there, like in December and earlier during rifle season, and how they're behaving then. But that's all by lottery. You have to draw for that.
Gotcha. I was going to ask if you thought they got a lot of pressure if it was over the counter, but if it's lottery, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I gotcha. You said you didn't see another human out there while you were hunting, correct?
No. Well, except for Tony has one ranch hand who was out fixing fences, but that was, again, we glassed them from miles away.
Yeah, because you were saying what you're using the private land, you access a piece of public, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, that's cool. That's an interesting hunt that not a lot of people think about as far as Western hunting and everything. Probably because of the time of year, and it's not typically thought of as a hunting season. At least for my coming from the east here, that's typically when we're winding down our whitetail season.
Yeah, it seems like,
and that's it.
In the east, most people think Alabama, because their ruts in February, January. People either migrate to Alabama, or out west. Though it's go try to get a Coues.
Yeah, it definitely seems like in the last few weeks on social media and stuff, I'm seeing all these, like you said, a lot of the industry guys hunting the Coues deer, cows deer, recently here, like you said, in between ATA and SHOT Show. Yeah. And like you said, in Arizona, and I think maybe Steve Ranella and a few people were in Mexico hunting them. So that's pretty cool that those deer, live in that different type of environment that at least I've never been to. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's like, Bergman's ruler, hot climate animals get smaller, cold climate animals get bigger. So, it's funny seeing, 200 plus pound whitetail are the norm, up in Ontario. And then, down there. They're small to help keep their body heat down when it's really hot. So
yeah, that would have been interesting for me going from hunting the whitetails in the bow zone of Alberta and then going down there and hunting, Coues deer from, going from a 300-pound animal down to a 100-pound, basically a similar species there.
Right. So yeah, because you were up there in Alberta testing some of the new Sitka whitetail stuff, right?
Yep. Yeah, I was up there in the bow zone with an outfitter, Jim Hull Jr. up there, and it was an amazing experience from that side of things. I'd love to try hunting some of that somewhat desert terrain though. That's on my radar. My dad actually last year hunted. He drew a tag in New Mexico for mule deer in January, and he was just talking about the interesting aspect of that at spot and stalk in that, somewhat desert type terrain. And it just sounded like something that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I find that, when one of the nice things, if you're fortunate enough to travel and hunt, is you just learn things that help you other places. You learn to apply different techniques and styles and learn to read sign differently. It just helps, I think, with your overall education level and understanding of the environment and what animals do. When you were up in Alberta, did you still hunt stands, or were you able to get out and track in the snow?
It was all stand hunting. Yeah, we weren't allowed putting boots on the ground really at all. It was trying to keep the pressure down. We were sitting over like alfalfa and hay fields type like that, and just waiting for them to come out of the timber. So it was all tree stand hunting.
That is one of my favorite, if you have northern listeners or people up in Quebec and Ontario. One of like I have friends in Vermont who just, live and wait for the snow to get out to track bucks in the snow. And the famous family, the Benoits, their hunting style of, you hike till you cut a big buck track in the snow and you follow it till you find that deer. And it is really cool going from the desert where you're glass, and then you get into that eastern, really kind of intimate, you can't see very far environment. You have to you hunt deer sign, then you hunt the deer. And I think it was 2014, I went with a friend up to Ontario, again, public land, crown land, and, just driving the forest roads covered in snow until you get fresh snow, find a good buck track, pull over, and just start following it. And I was able to take a nice buck doing that. I wrote a story on Sitka's blog back then, actually a photo from that won Sitka's Diverge contest in 2014. I won the whitetail category with a photo from that hunt.
Oh, gotcha. Nice.
Yeah, that's just a really, really fun, active way of hunting. That buck and I came face to face at 10 yards. So, and in like this really cool, just like sound room, deadened, everything had every single stick every direction had like 6 inches of snow on it.
Yeah.
And he just came running towards me, head down, and looked at me. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "What are you doing here?" I was hunting with my 45-70, my Marlin guide gun. I love that gun. And I raised it up, and the safeties, traditional old school, cylinder safety on the kind of the right side, and it was frozen. I couldn't get the safety off, and this buck is staring at me. And I was like looking through. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Like think. How long am I? And I just thought to myself, cycle around. Maybe the vibration of cycling around will free the safety. And sure enough, I cycled around with the lever, and I felt the safety slide, and all I could see was just the white patch under his throat, and I just put the bullet right there and collapsed some of his tracks, and fell into this tree and covered himself in snow. It's a really fun way to hunt that down here. And every hunting season here in Tennessee, I'm just dying for it to snow during deer season. It hasn't yet. It's only snowed afterwards, and I've gone out hiking, looking for shads or looking for old late season deer trails and finding hogs. I've tried, track down hogs doing it here, but have yet to have it happen here during deer season. I've got my fingers crossed.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania, we do get snow during rifle season. Sometimes it's not as much anymore, but that's a way that my grandfather taught me to hunt. Is he was a big proponent and is a big proponent of doing that, and just walking or even driving forest roads until you cut a track early in the morning, or just like I said, just walking until you cut a big track. And you learn a lot about a deer and how they move when you follow them like that. A lot of times you don't catch up to them, or they'll somehow wind you or see you before you see them. But you learn so much about how a deer moves by doing that. It's a really fun way of hunting, that's for sure.
It is. It's like you said. You learn. You'll learn, the more you do it, you'll learn to read a fresh track versus an older track, and you'll learn to read buck age by the track shape better, and what a really big buck track looks like versus just a nice buck. And then when you're on a track and then it starts zigzagging, and you learn to look to your right and to your left, because that's probably when they start zigzagging a lot. That's probably a buck about to bed, and they'll usually bed with the wind looking at their back track. So, you'll learn those things the more you follow a deer like that. Like you're saying, you'll just learn a lot more about what they do and where they like to bed. It's great finding just doing that to learn where deer bed is valuable intel, and seeing the spots they like.
Yeah, I had a guy on the podcast here recently, a good friend of mine, Johnny Stewart, and he was telling me, and before I even recorded with him, I've been friends with him for a few years, and he was like, he goes, Bo, go out, even if you don't have a buck tag, go out late season and just find a track and follow it. He's like, you'll learn so much about that deer, what they're eating, what they're doing, how they're moving, and then if you say you do bump them, what they do when they're pressured. He goes, you learn so much by following a track like that. So that's a really, really interesting way to kind of learn a deer's behaviors, and especially an older buck.
100% agree, because a lot of these older buck, the older deer, they have their core areas. Well, they'll wander a bit more, and those big northern deer roam a little bit more, I think, than a lot of our Appalachian deer do. But when it does happen late, like you said, those bucks tend to have their preferred bedding spots. Usually, just a handful, under half a dozen, and they tend to have their escape routes. And when they're bumped, the way they go. So you can learn a lot about, if the wind is wrong and he catches you before you even know he's there, where he's going to go. And you'll figure out their escape routes, as well as their feeding areas and their bedding areas and all of it. And you may find a pretty nice shed in the process. So.
Yeah, no, that's true. So Damon, I had the way I'd found you, I was telling you on the phone here when we talked last week, I found a few of your articles and videos. I think it was a little over a year ago, and it was a while after you actually wrote them, but you had talked about hunting in Tennessee, where you're at in the Appalachian region, if I'm correct. And actually, it's funny because one of your articles is titled East Meets West, isn't it?
It's correct, yeah.
Yeah, we were laughing about that. I was like, well, I guess I stole the name from you. I didn't even realize it, but so that's just I hope
it works out good for you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. But yeah, anyways, those articles, they really resonated with me, because I'm like, wow, look, someone else is hunting the style that that I grew up doing, and that I love to do, and you were doing it in Tennessee. And that's another reason that made me realize that there's a lot more people that are doing this, throughout the East Coast and the Appalachian region than I originally anticipated. I kind of thought I was in my own little bubble. But do you want to talk a little bit about how you're hunting in Tennessee, and specifically with deer?
Sure. Yeah. So, I wrote that article. It was the very first article on the Orion Coolers blog. I wrote that article literally when we launched the webpage, and we just needed, an article, some kind of content. And when I moved here, I'd already done I'd done some traveling hunts, hunted caribou in Quebec, and it was on that hunt that I really learned to pack an animal and to quarter an animal in the field. And that's kind of one of the key skills, I think, that anybody aspiring to hunt more backcountry and hunt more public land has to learn, because you're just not going to drag a deer out. It's going to be coming out in pieces, and you got to understand your state regulations for what's allowed and what's not. In Tennessee, you have to leave evidence of sex, which is pretty common for a lot of states. It means leaving something attached to the ham so you can distinguish buck or doe, part of the scrotum or part of the female genitalia. So when I moved here from Vermont, Vermont's got a lot of great public land and the national forest, but pretty low deer densities. Down here in the South, in Tennessee, there's pretty good deer densities from what I'm used to. And a lot of public land, a lot of wildlife management areas. There's a state, I'm almost surrounded by a ring of public land where I live. I have, Firestone, Bridgestone, WMA. We live kind of on the Cumberland Plateau. So the Appalachians, when they come down, kind of, if you're on the west side, Cumberland Plateau region, and it's just it's relatively flat, and then a very kind of steep drop off kind of runs along like the Chattanooga area and near us, and a lot of creeks, a lot of canyon country, steep country, great whitewater because of that. And so, when I moved here and I started looking for places to hunt, it was, okay, well, I got this public land, this direction, I got this public land. We live right next to Bledsoe State Forest. So they're just all kind of options. And even there's a state park right here, Fall Creek Falls State Park, that even has a 1 week only, bow only hunt on it. Even, not a lot of state parks anywhere allow hunting. But this one does, for that 1 week. And so at any rate, I started asking around, these different areas, how much pressure. And one of the spots that I had inquired about was like, oh, no, nobody hunts in there. Deer just get old and die in there. You can't get one out. And I was like, ring, ring, ring,
Yeah.
Okay, sure. That sounds, yeah. He's like, people just told, oh, you can't get a 4-wheeler in there. There's no way to get deer out. It's very steep. It's a couple miles to get in, but it's more steep. You got to go down, hike down, about 700 feet, 500 feet of vertical, depending on. Anyway, there's a terrain limiter for most people, and so I started exploring it. And the geology here is just really cool. Every time I hike in the woods here, I seem to find something neat. And there's a lot of caves. There's a lot of waterfalls, and our rivers, like, they're there 1 second and gone the next. Like, they literally go underground. So there's limestone, a lot of limestone here. So there's aquifers underground. And if the aquifer is not full of water, the surface water won't run. So the river might be there, and then in a tenth of a mile, it's gone. It's gone underground into a hole. And it's not until we've had days of rain that the river will actually run everywhere on the surface. So there's weird things like that happen. There's waterfalls that come out of a canyon wall, and then they go into a sinkhole and they're gone again. It's crazy stuff. But it's really neat to see. So I started hunting, exploring those kind of areas, and there's no way. Again, there's no way to get a deer out. You're not gonna field dress it and carry it unless you're far more of a man than I am. You're gonna be quartering that deer and putting it in a backpack, and that just became a lot of my style that I like to do. I'll do overnighters. I'll do some multi-days. I'll do day hunts. My day hunts generally start, I'll get up at 3 or 4, and I'm hiking, by 4 or 5. And I'm usually not too some of the spots I like to sit until sunrise. So an hour and a half, 2 hours later. And sometimes there's river crossings, and I have to carry in waders, to get across. Sometimes I don't have to do that. But it's wild deer. I mean, there's no managed anything in these areas. There's no fields. There's no, you're not figuring out, you're not patterning a deer by the way it enters and leaves, an ag field. It's, you're hiking until you find sign. You're hiking until you find a tree that's dropping acorns, or you're hiking and you're figuring out where the doe like to bed, and then when of the on depending on the winds, what's the downwind side that buck's going to come by to find the does that bed in that area, to check them when the rut's on. You see the early to late season transitions. You see them transitioning, to eating briars in the last, as hunting in the South goes, we're pretty green, for a lot of the hunting season. It's not until, mid-December that the woods really start getting brown. And then that's usually the rut's very much tailing down or over, and deer kind of move to late season feeding, and the acorns are gone. So they start eating briars and different kind of undergrowth. And the trails become more defined again. And so just learning all of those aspects. And that was an article I wrote with East Meets West was, okay, I gotta, understand the pressure equation, then understand the hunting equation and how to get the animal out. And kind of some of the thought process of how that worked together. And I think on that one, I had shot that same 45-70 that I used in Ontario. I shot a kind of a cool, kind of almost palmated buck. He was pretty neat. I shot him on, it is the only buck I've still shot on Thanksgiving morning. That was pretty cool.
Oh, nice. Were you able to get back for Thanksgiving dinner in time?
I was. I had him home in my fridge by 1.
Perfect. I was gonna say that would be the ticket there. Got to get back for the Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah. So when you said you're packing, you're quartering up the deer, and that's similar to what I do. Well, it is what I do. In Pennsylvania, in some of these spots that are back in, and you and I talked about it on the phone offline from the podcast here, as far as how that's just such a preferred way of doing it for you now, and it has been for me, just from the aspect of you one, when you're by yourself, getting that deer out, dragging it is very tough. Where if you put it on your back and you have a backpack that can carry weight comfortably and you can get it out of there, as well as when you get back, the work's done from the standpoint of you don't have to hang it and skin it and do all that. It's already done, by the time you get back.
Yeah, most of the time here, we're not cold enough to really leave a deer hanging outside for multiple days anyway. There is a hunt that I filmed. It was the original Orion Chronicles, and I did a hunt muzzleloader, and I actually took a buck, 2 different bucks, 2 different days, and I hung one in game bag. I hung the first one in game bags, like at the mouth of this cave, because that's where I know that there's cold air coming out when it's warm. I think it was like 70 degrees that day, so I hung the quartered deer at the mouth of this cave for the night, just because that's the coldest air that I knew of during the day. And then the next morning, shot. I used his rack. I cut his rack off, and I rattled in a really nice buck with that rack the next morning. And I was hunting on the ground, mobile. There's a video that's on YouTube, the Orion Chronicles on YouTube. And I couldn't do that again if I tried 100 times. It just, everything came together. But getting that meat out, then I was like, oh man, I got multiple loads. I was starting to get worried about just one day in those kind of temps, hanging in the first deer overnight, to get all that out, and get it into the fridge. But generally, like you said, if I cut it up, I'll get it into meat trays in my refrigerator, to age for a few days, or just, then I'll get through it. But usually, you get home, you don't have a lot of work to do. It's either deboned or bone in, but either way, it can go right into meat trays in the fridge, and start getting cool. You can also cool them down in your Orion. Usually I'll keep the Orion in the back of the truck full of ice, depending on how long the drive is, and get them in there. And you can also keep them in there for days on end if you want. I know a lot of guys here who will age their meat in a cooler. So you just need layers of ice, and you can do that too. So yeah, it changes how you look at the terrain. I've heard a lot of people, I can't go, I won't go there because it's too far, I'm in too deep. I don't even hunt these places because they feel like they can't get their game out. And if you Google the gutless method, that tends to be how I deal with my meat. I don't even gut it. It's a slit down the spine, peel that hide and take off the back strap, take off each quarter, take off the neck, and then you can take out the inside tenderloins by just doing a little slit and reaching in, pulling it, and then roll the animal over, and then repeat. You peel the other side down. You can cut that hide and lay it on the ground as like a nice, just somewhere to lay your meat. I'll do that, or I'll lay them there's like a rhododendron or some other convenient tree that's strong enough to hold the weight. Or I'll take the whole quarter off and just, hang it on a pine tree nub, and then I'll debone it, at my leisure before the bees and stuff get on it. But it opens up so much more terrain when you have that skill and you're comfortable doing it. I encourage everybody to start small. Do it. Learn to quarter an animal when you don't need to do it. Do it when you're hunting a field, or do it when you're hunting an area where you can. There's no pressure to do it. You can make mistakes, no big deal, and do it. And then go on a backpacking trip where you're not actually carrying a weapon. Just learn what it takes to be a backpacker. And then put two and two together. And then next time, then you got a gun, and then you got, comfort level of what it takes to carry a deer out. You do have to have the right kind of pack. There's not a lot of packs can do it, but there are packs that definitely do it better than others. Traditional backpacking packs, you can use a mountaineering or a climbing pack and you can get the job done. But, packs that have dedicated meat chambers, packs that have internal load systems to keep that meat weight up against your back and store a weapon and the meat and gear, they're a reason that they exist, because they do a good job.
Yeah. What is there a specific pack that you like to use for? Let's just go with day hunting. If you're going to go in for a day hunt and then pack out a deer, is there one that you choose to use?
Well, first I will disclaimer that I'm a pack junkie, and I I've been proud of development. I love trying them all, see which ones I like, don't like. So there is an article on the Orion blog I wrote, what's in my day pack, and it's what I would carry to get a deer out here. And that pack was the Sitka's Bivy 30 in subalpine, and that's got a kind of a bigger outer pocket, so I can put all of the clothes that I'll have for that day into that when I have to, and use the main chamber for meat. And for a day pack, I'm looking for something usually at least 30 liters for whitetail, deboned, to get it out. And then, but there's the Exo mountain gear, they're good guys, made in USA out of Idaho. Their pack is a different style, but the main pack body separates, and then you can pack your meat bag in between the pack body and the pack frame and kind of sandwich it back together. Those do really good. I'm a big fan of Glen Eberly Stocks packs. They're just one, kind of a very unique kind of center opening meat. The pack kind of unfolds vertically, and then there's kind of meat chamber that's left right in the middle, and filling that. That's what I used in my first caribou hunt. There's those different styles, and then carrying a gun versus a bow, it kind of dictates which pack I'll use. Eberly has a cool system, a scabbard down your spine. He comes from a biathlon background, skiing, so he kind of came up with packs that didn't interfere with his cross country motion. He was an Olympian, and then keeping that weight and that gun centered on your spine is very comfortable, but then having the meat chamber beyond it was kind of a unique evolution. So it's the new Sitka's got the new Mountain Hauler series. I've been pleased with them. I've been testing the Mountain Hauler 4000, which just came out, and that's what I used in the Coues Deer hunt, and that's what I used this fall hunting here, and I packed a deer out with it. So it's there's a lot of good options. When it comes to packs, it's kind of like shoes, right? You gotta, everybody's body's different. You gotta find the one that you can carry well, light, and then doesn't make a lot of noise to me. Works with my body, and brings what I need for the day. Generally on day hunt, I'm just gonna have insulated kind of jacket of some sort. I'll have meat bags. I'll have knives. I'll have whatever safety or med kit or, GPS communicator. I carry one here. There's no cell phone service where I hunt, so I'll have that to get a hold of my wife or friends if I'm going to be late. In that article I wrote on what's on my day packs on Sick as Blood. You can see everything specifically about what I carry on a day hunt on the Orion Coolers blog. And then the overnight gear just adds into that and changes kind of the pack. But I look for packs that are quiet, comfortable, kind of empty, and then, comfortable loaded. And that's obviously a bit of an oxymoron. I've never been comfortable carrying any huge heavy load out.
Yeah.
But it's there are packs that it's painful, and it's not fitted right to you. You're gonna have a bad day. So and it goes to footwear too. You're not gonna do a hunt like that in sneakers. You got to have a boot that can carry the weight and support your body structure, ankle structure, with that much weight in it. So lots of details there.
Yeah. No, I get you. And from the boot thing, just real quick, a point that I want to add, and you're kind of leading to this, but we're not wearing, rubber boots like your typical whitetail hunter would, because that just doesn't work as far as when you go to pack out a deer. I'm using something that has some support, and also it's light enough and breathable enough that you're not, sweating and everything when you're walking, and able to traverse through some, relatively steep terrain.
Right. Yeah. And I'm generally not sitting still a long time. So I'm not wearing heavily insulated boots. If it's super cold, I'll just put little toe warmers, in my sock kind of thing. I'm not bringing heavy insulated, 600 grams insulate kind of boots. I wear Scarpa boots from my mountaineering background. They fit I have a very narrow, low volume foot that I've always been comfortable in Scarpa's mountaineering boots. So that tends to be what I hike in. And you got to find a boot that fits your foot shape, and there are definitely different brands that fit better foot shapes better than others. But yeah, it's a different game, and if it's below freezing, my feet will get cold, but by the time I get hiking, they warm up. So
yeah, no, that's and you don't hunt much from a tree stand, you were saying, right?
It's probably 50-50, and it kind of depends on the time of year. I certainly hunt heavier from tree stands during archery season, just because the range factor, getting close. So I'll have spots that I'll tend to hunt during archery season, a little differently than once muzzleloader, and then rifle comes on. So, the weapon that I hunt with, and I'll hunt with my bow sometimes during rifle season, I tend to, Randy and I call a hashtag freezer function. The weapon that I hunt with is the direct reflection of how much meat I need.
Yeah.
And if I've had a great archery season, I'll hunt with my traditional bow, or I'll hunt with my compound bow, later into the season, because I'm more looking, for a unique experience and trying to solve that problem. Filling my freezer isn't a priority at that point. But then there's years, this year is a good example where I didn't get anything, during archery or muzzleloader. I let everything walk, and, looking back, yeah, it would have changed my season had I just taken, some smaller, younger animals, and then wouldn't have felt pressure. But then it's like finally, we have some family property in South Carolina, and when I went over there after the holidays with my rifle, it was game on. It was like, yeah, if I see a doe in the field, I'm shooting her.
Yeah.
And I put 3 deer in the freezer, in 3 days. And sure, if I changed the way I hunted here, it would have changed things too. But everybody makes their own personal choices and priorities about what how they want to hunt and what they're looking to get out of it. Meat's a big one for me, but usually I hope to take a deer during archery. Muzzleloader season here, which is early November, tends to be when a lot of the big bucks get seen. More mature bucks, they're in that early kind of seeking phase of the rut, and then switching to rifle to later. But if I've filled, you're allowed 2 bucks in Tennessee. I didn't fill either this year. But past years, if I fill one during archery, then I'll kind of relax, what I do with the other ones. And that one filming year, I shot both my bucks during muzzleloader in the same weekend. So that year was easy. I tagged out that weekend and I hunted with my trad bow the rest of the season for does. So,
yeah, no, that's cool. That's, So that film actually too, I did watch that and would highly recommend everyone take a look at it. It's a really cool film, as you don't see too many Appalachian style hunting films out there. So I'd definitely recommend taking a look at that and checking it out from that side of things. And one other point I wanted to add, just from to when you were talking about how you stuff like hand warmers or anything in your socks. One thing that I do when I wear uninsulated boots, and I can't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast at all, but I'll wear, my uninsulated Loas, or I have a pair of crispy boots that just have 400 gram insulate, pretty lightweight, that I can still wear when it's cold weather hunting, but my feet don't sweat as much. When I get to a tree stand or a place I'm going to sit, I have these little slippers that go over top my boots that have a slot for a hand warmer. And actually the company that I have I think they're out of business. You can't find them anymore. They're called Hot Mocks, and I found them on eBay for like $12.95, and it was the best money I ever spent, because I just throw like one of the big body warmers in there, and I'm good sitting all day with those over uninsulated boots down to temperatures in the teens. So it's a pretty nice little addition there. That lightweight, they clip right on the back of my pack, and that's it.
Cool. Yeah, another cool. I don't know if they still make them, but the brand Outdoor Research, makes various styles of gaiters. And from my ice climbing days, I have a pair of their like overboot gaiters. They're basically gaiters that hook around the toe of your boot, but instead of just like covering ankle up, they cover the entire boot up to your shins. But then the sole's exposed, so you can wear a crampon climbing ice. Yep. And inside, it's full Gore-Tex, but then inside what covers your boot, there's kind of a dual layer, and you can insert sheets of foam, different density or thickness of foam into that, depending on how warm it is. And those make a huge difference when it's cold. I've kept on to that's a piece of gear that I've kind of kept over the years. That's nice. And I've tried doing packable down booties, which Sierra Designs have made some. I don't know the brands that make them now, but a lot of mountaineers carry them. Once you're in your tent, sleeping on slides of mountains on big high altitude climbs. Those can I've put those on a tree before. I've taken my boots off and put those.
Oh, really?
On. Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh,
it's probably not good for scent. Probably not good for scent management. You're taking boots off and putting them under your seat.
Yeah.
But my feet stayed warm. So
hey, then you're in the stand longer, and that's what matters, right?
Exactly. I think the wind, to me, the wind matters more anyway. So.
Yep, I'm in the same boat from that aspect. But all right, Damon, one other thing that was interesting that you brought up to me was are you into tracking dogs, or what's your deal with tracking dogs?
Yeah. So I have this year. He's 2 years old now. It's his second season, but yeah, I just have my own. I don't train others. I got what's called a Teckel. So Teckel, basically in Germany or Europe just means any dachshund, but here in the U.S., a Teckel is used to kind of denote a wire hair of German hunting lines, so like real working dachshunds. Most people think of dachshunds as sausage, wiener dog, lap dogs, but they were bred as working dogs originally. They were bred, to hunt underground, so they were bred to go into holes, fox, badger, and for tracking. And they're really good at tracking lost game. So I had met some tracking service. There's a hunting show up in Vermont called the Yankee Sportsman's Classic, and there was a group there kind of showing their dogs for deer recovery. A hunter shoots a deer, loses it, dogs to go find it. And dachshunds, teckels are kind of sought after for that application. In Europe, most hunting guides or game managers, you have to have a dog available for recovery by law in some places. Culturally there, recovering the animal is the number one priority, and justifiably so. You've taken that responsibility to take the animal's life. It's up to you. You should do everything in your power to find it. And dachshunds have a really good. People think they're smelling blood, but in actuality, there's what's called an interdigital gland. There's a scent gland in between the hoof pads of a deer, and it's a unique scent. So, good tracking dogs track with no blood at all, and they can follow that deer for quite a long, hundreds of yards, not miles, just off his scent pad. And teckels are really good at it. They're stubborn dogs, and dachshunds are bred. They're not like labs. They're not looking to please you. They're kind of looking to please themselves. But they were bred to be independent hunters. They were bred to figure out the problem on their own and find the animal. And that's what makes them good. They're really good. They're stubborn, but they're really good at staying on a particular deer's scent and distinguishing that deer's scent over other deer scent, and finding it, have a really strong prey drive. So I got Jaeger, he's 2 now, got him a couple seasons ago from there's only a couple breeders in North America that breed teckels, and they're registered in Germany at the Deutsch Teckel Club, and started training them. And they're introduced at a very young age here. The breeders are serious, and they're putting deer hooves and legs into the puppies' whelping pens at very, very young ages, and kind of building a prey drive. And last season, I took them, on various hunts. I tried to just introduce him to scents. He got to smell whitetail, wild boar, antelope, mule deer, and do a couple, training tracks. I'd shoot it. If I shot a deer, just go get him and let him go smell it, kind of thing, and follow it. And then in the off season, training, doing mock tracks, and you can do that with different deer parts, doing drags, using blood, using treats, different things for the dog to find at the end. And he always just blows my mind. And so this year was the first year, though, that we started, taking calls for the public. And there's a group called United Blood Trackers online. And no matter where you live in the states, they're working with state legislatures all over the country to legalize tracking, leashed tracking in those states, or just tracking in general. Most states you have to track on lead. Some states do not require it. But in Tennessee, it is a leash tracking state. But you can go there. If you shoot a deer and lose it, you can go there and you can find a tracker in your area, contact them, and they can come help you find your deer. And so that just kind of fascinated me. I thought, hey, that's what a great way. You don't see a lot of hunting dogs use it that way. Just what a valuable resource. And there's some trackers in the country. I think this year there's amongst United Blood Trackers, people registered. They're doing a kind of a summary poll right now of what all was tracked, and they're tracking, deer, moose, elk, bear. People contact you when they lose dogs. I think there were 2 lost dogs found this year. But I think they're up around 900 deer recovered that were lost by UBT members. We did 6. I only did 6 tracks. Not for me, just 6 tracks for the public this year. And we found 4, and the other 2. We didn't find were either confirmed alive or dead, where Yeager said they were. One we had to stop because of the property line we weren't allowed to cross, and the deer was on the other side. And the land, that deer was found the next day by vultures, and the hunter contacted me and said, "Hey, the deer's where Yeager said it was." And the other one they got on game camera alive, 3 weeks later. So yeah, training them. Was kind of fun, and you kind of know the end result. And then this season was the first call came in. I was actually guiding a hunt for wounded veterans. Tennessee Wildlife, TWRA, does a hunt for veterans on a property near Chattanooga, it's right by a Volkswagen factory. It's a public park, but it's kind of overrun by deer, and they close it off for 1 weekend a year, and we bring in wounded vets and take them hunting and try to pull as many deer out as possible. And each vet's allowed 2 deer. At any rate, I was supposed to go down there to help be one of the guides, and SCI and TWRA put that on. And I got a call the morning of going down for like the meet and greet by a young hunter. He had shot a buck the day before, crossbow, saw it run, knew he hit it, found blood for a while, bumped it from a bed, and then couldn't find it. And then it rained. Him and his father looked that night. Then it rained heavy that night, and then they went back in the morning and couldn't find it. And then he went online and found me. And it just so happened that I was going to be like a half an hour from where he had been hunting for this wounded veterans hunt. So I was like, can you come help? And this is literally Yeager's first, what I would call a real track. Totally cold call. I didn't know where the animal was. All those kind of things. And stranger, the whole bit. So I was like, yeah, let me go drop the stuff off. I had a bunch of kind of prizes and giveaways I collected from friends in the industry and sponsors to give to the veterans. And then I was like, let me go drop this stuff off, and then I'll come help you. And it was about 3:30 when I got to where he'd been hunting. So it was roughly 20 hours after he shot that deer. And Jaeger, he kind of pointed out where he thought the deer had gone and where he thought it had been bedded. And Jaeger was kind of following, and we found some obvious blood. And then all the sign went away, and the hunters, I felt, they thought they saw it go this way. Jaeger saw me go a different way, which is often the case. A lot of times a hunter can see a deer run and they don't know if it's their deer or not their deer, and things can get confusing. Dogs know a lot. And we ended up following for a few hundred yards and no sign at all. And I actually stopped to check my GPS, look at the satellite on my phone, kind of orient myself. And I was like, oh, he's on a different deer. He is, he's just following a deer right now. He doesn't know what he's on. And then when I actually took my phone out and looked down at my phone, just so happened there was a white rock a foot from my right boot, and there was 3 drops of blood on it. And I was like, oh my God, he's still on this freaking deer. And I was like, okay, keep going. And so he kept going, and he got kind of lost interest. And I was like, okay, let's go back and reset him at that where we know the deer was, and look at that rock. And I went back, and you always hear that wounded deer run downhill, or wounded deer go to water. But when I looked at the rock, I could see the blood spatter, the fingers pointing up the mountainside, not running the slope down the side like we were doing. And I was like, this deer at this point had looped. He either he was, whatever reason, he was running uphill at this point. He wasn't side sloping it. And sure enough, Jaeger then started heading straight up the mountainside. And I was crawling hands and knees through this underbrush, and then it got into the gnarliest briar patch I've ever seen, like briars diameter my thumb and 12 feet tall. And that buck was laying 20 yards into that stuff.
Really?
Yeah. And, hunters were blown away. I was blown away. I was like, you just blew my mind, dog. And that was kind of the start of this year's tracking season. And I did that video is on my personal YouTube page, Damon Bungard. People can find it. There's 3 videos of him tracking now. That buck is on there, which is a beautiful 14 point with kickers, gorgeous buck. And then a doe he found for me, which is a good example. I shot a doe with my bow during rifle season, and just made a weird sound I'd never heard. It was very hollow and kicking a pumpkin kind of sound. And I was like, oh no, I shot that deer back. And I got down from my tree stand and walked to, saw the arrow, a little bit of blood, not much. And the arrow looked, decent, but at the hit site, it was just white hair. And I was like, oh, I shot her low in the gut. That was my reaction, was, funky sound and white belly hair. This can't be good, right? So I just left. I didn't even look for that deer. I just, saved the spot where the arrow was and where the fur was, and went home and waited 4 hours. Now, here there's a lot of coyotes where I hunt. There, I'd already shot one with my bow earlier this year, and seen many others. And so I didn't want to leave her overnight And so that's always comes into a factor of how long you wait, what is the Cody factor where you are. And so I went and got Yeager and came back, and turns out that deer hadn't run 150 yards. It had gone over this rise, and there it was. And Yeager went right to it. He didn't even mess around. I mean, there was no blood for like 40, 50 yards. And he smelled the white fur, and then the blood started, and then he went right to her. So that was just a safety factor, had I not had the dog, I probably would have found that deer, but it's much easier, when he knows what he's doing. And then his last track of the season was another just mind blower. A hunter, about an hour from me, shot a buck at 9 a.m, 30-30 down the side of his face. Had great blood for 100 yards. I mean, nice pools. Anybody would look at that and say, "Oh, it's a dead deer, nice blood." But then it just stopped. And so we got there around I think it was around 3 or 4, after he'd been shot that morning. And the hunter had done great. He had not grid searched. When he knew he was going to find a dog, he just kind of backed out. And there's also a Tennessee blood trailing network group, a good network of trackers here in Tennessee. And he was cool because he was from New York, and there's a Teckle breeder in New York, and the guy who literally wrote the book, John Giannini, and there's a book, Blood Trailing Dogs for Finding Wounded Deer. And he's a Teckle breeder. And he had seen or heard of his dogs, and actually lived only a few hours from them before he moved to Tennessee. So he was kind of blown away. Oh, look at the little dog, look at the little, Jaeger's 23 pounds, but, doesn't look like much of a, a hunting killer kind of dog. But, when he starts tracking, he goes crazy. And sure enough, the hunter done great. He hadn't grid search, which often spreads a lot of scent. The dog, makes it harder. If he did everything right, the hunter did, backed out, marked the hit site, and we took it. And Yeager followed it down off this mountain, and he followed a scent for a while into this like somebody's backyard, and then kind of looped back, gave up, came back on his own, went down a different gully, and I just see a drop of blood, and I was like, oh wow, he's still on this deer. And then we dropped off the mountain, crossed the creek, and right on the small creek edge there was one little drop of blood, and then it hit the road, and then I saw a little drop of blood on the road, and then the deer crossed the road, then jumped the barbed wire fence into these big cut fields, just field after field after field. And we had seen some fur on the barbed wire fence where he had jumped, so knew he was still on it. And then we were calling different landowners, getting permission to go, now crossing into different properties. And Yeager, that field was hard for him. He just kind of was running these big loops, these big, like, sweeping, I think there would have been a lot of deer in there or cows or who knows, but he was just kind of doing these loops, and then finally settled on a line. And we went for hundreds of yards with no sign, and then went through this gap in a barbed wire fence separating another field, and no sign. I was like, well, if you're still on it, there's got to be a sign in here. Looked around, couldn't see anything. And then he's heading for this other fence line that I could see pretty dense uncut field behind it. And right at that fence line, here's this bloody blade of grass after 600, 700, 800 yards of nothing. There's a bloody weed. And I knew he was still on it. And then you could see where that deer had run along that fence for about 50 yards. I think he was probably feeling pretty weak at that point, looking for a place to cross. Finally had found a place to cross, and was laying dead 20 yards over the fence in that dense brush.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that's a video. I put a video of that one on my channel too on YouTube. And that was, this is all just POV stuff.
Yeah,
home edited, but it just blew my. It's amazing what these trained tracking dogs can do. And it's just kind of like the tracking in the snow conversation. It's just helped me learn a lot about what wounded deer really do.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't just run downhill. They're going to run where they feel secure and back to their bedding area. They loop back a lot. They backtrack often. it's just neat seeing a dog figure that out. It's just he's mind blowing what he's able to do.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy is in Pennsylvania just this past year they legalized being able to use tracking dogs, and I had looked up. So someone had told me about the United Blood Trackers. Is it organization? How's that? United Blood Trackers.
UnitedBloodTrackers.org.
.org. Yeah, and someone gave me that website before, and I looked it up and was ahead of season to find trackers in my area, and there's none like really close, but there's a couple within an hour to an hour and 15 minutes away, and I made sure that I wrote down those phone numbers in case you come to that situation, because that's awesome that you're able to do that, and I don't understand why that wouldn't be legalized in every state to be able to help find wounded game in my opinion.
I think of just some old stigmas around if you're running deer with dogs, which is, not legal in most states, actually, using dogs to drive deer. And it's just people understanding and legislating, people making the laws, understanding, what a leash dog or a trained recovery dog can actually do. And it honestly, I've been able to hunt a lot and, fortunate in that respect. It's a great feeling helping somebody find their deer. And it's fun seeing the dog work, and it's like hunting with plus a game of Clue. You're and it is a team effort. In a lot of these cases, it's me. You can decide, are you going to reset the dog? Is it reading the sign? That rock's a good example. Going back and studying a little bit more, and helping the dog. But also listening to the dog, reading his body language. You can kind of tell when he'll get vocal. He'll bark when he's on a really hot deer, and he'll bark when he's near a live one. And it was funny because I guess his mother is known for she's pretty quiet on the track, but if she starts barking, that means the deer is within 50 yards. Like that's kind of the handler just learned that with his mother. So. I think there's a lot of good breeds. Most dogs can be trained to do it. Some dogs are just more suited than others. But it's obviously there's the bloodhounds of the world and curs and catahoulas, and there's different breeds that are well suited. But it's amazing seeing a tuckle work. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really cool to hear that, and I didn't know. I'm gonna have to check out your YouTube channel to take a look at those videos. That just blows my mind that dogs are able to do that, and just how much, I guess, better they are at that than we are. That's for sure.
Yeah, recovering deer it's a skill. It's part of hunting, and nobody wants to have to use a dog. But you don't get a dog when it's easy.
Yeah.
Usually you shoot a deer, and if you make a reasonably good shot, that deer is usually dead within 100 yards. But it's when they're not, what do you do? And using a recovery dog as a trained one is no doubt. I'm fully now convinced that there's no better solution than.
I mean, if you bow hunt long enough, I'm going to use bow hunting for an example because it seems to happen a little more. But even gun hunting, you're going to make a bad shot at some point, no matter how much you practice, no matter how good the shot felt. There's always going to be a situation, unfortunately, when you make a less than ideal shot. So that's an extremely valuable resource to have to be able to find a blood tracking dog and handler in the area.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's you hunt long enough, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I do believe in the responsibility of recovering anything that you shoot, or doing your due diligence. Maybe it is only wounded and survives, but you should still do whatever your due diligence is. And dogs aren't always available, but if one is, I just can't recommend enough getting that handler out there.
Awesome. So Damon, is there anything else from the side of the blood tracking dogs or anything with hunting in Tennessee? Anything else that you want to cover here before we part ways?
Yeah, I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, I told you an hour, but I knew that this conversation was probably going to go a little longer than that.
Yeah,
so maybe apologize.
Maybe next time we'll get into kayak hunting and get access, and check out Orion Kennels. A little plug there, our new Orion Kennels brand that we're launching. And if you have a dog, check out that book by John Giannini, the blood trailing dogs for finding wounded deer. It's on Amazon or their website, Born to Track. And feel free, if anybody listeners have any questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to share what I can when I can. You can look me up. It's Damon, Damon, at Orion Coolers or at Jackson Kayak or at Orion Kennels. And happy to help when and where I can. But yeah, kayak hunting. Next time we'll talk kayak hunting.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm interested to hear about that topic myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people would be too. So we'll definitely revisit that at another time. So where else? I mean, you had talked about it all through the podcast here, but where else can people find more information on some of your writings, some of your content, your videos, everything else, and also with Orion Coolers? Sure.
So OrionCoolers.com, you can find the product information there, shop, all that kind of fun stuff. But there's also, there's learn and there's drop-down menus, and you can see blog posts, many of which I've written. There's, a good 8-part series on do-it-yourself caribou in Alaska. There's the What's in My Day Pack, those kind of articles, how to process, how to do your own Euro mounts for skulls. Those are all kind of how-tos that I've written on there. And then on the Jackson Kayak website, you can see all of our kayaks from whitewater to kayak fishing to recreational. But there's also blog posts in there. You can go under team members like myself and find the articles we've written. And then I'm on Instagram, just at Damon Bungard, YouTube at Damon Bungard, Facebook, Damon Bungard. And then check out Yeager's page. Yeager's at Yeager Tracks, Jaeger Tracks. Check him out. He's try to put some of his tracking exploits on his Instagram page, and there's little short videos, and then he's on my YouTube page.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to check him out. I didn't even realize he had his own Instagram page.
Yeah, it's a thing, right? Everybody's got one now.
Heck yeah. No, I'll definitely check that out. And Damon, thank you very much for coming on the podcast here, talking with me. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Next time, we'll do some more.
Yes, definitely will. All right, we'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.